There's a pattern that runs through every great myth, every hero's story, every transformative journey that has ever moved the human heart. And it's this: the hero must die before they can truly live. Not physically necessarily, though sometimes that too, but psychologically, spiritually, symbolically. They must undergo a death and rebirth. They must descend into darkness before they can ascend into light. They must lose themselves before they can find themselves. This is not just mythology. This is not just ancient storytelling. This is the actual pattern of human transformation. This is what happens when someone wakes up, when someone moves from unconscious living to conscious being, when someone stops merely existing and begins truly living. I've spent my entire life studying these patterns, these myths, these stories. And what I've discovered is that they're not just entertainment. They're not just cultural artifacts. They're maps. They're instructions. They're showing us the way. And one of the most consistent instructions they give is this: you must die before you can live. The spiritually awake, those who have made the hero's journey and returned, they've all done this. They've all experienced this death. And it wasn't optional. It wasn't something they could skip. It was the very thing that transformed them, that awakened them, that made them into the heroes they became. Today, I want to share with you 3 reasons why this is so. 3 reasons why the spiritually awake die before they live. Because if you understand these reasons, if you really grasp what this death is about and why it's necessary, you'll stop resisting it. You'll stop fearing it. You'll recognize it when it comes, and you'll have the courage to go through it instead of running away. The first reason: the old identity must be destroyed. The first reason the awakened ones die before they live is because the old identity must be destroyed to make room for the new. You cannot become who you're meant to be while you're still clinging to who you've been. The caterpillar cannot become a butterfly while insisting on remaining a caterpillar. Something has to die. Let me tell you what I mean by the old identity. I'm talking about the person you think you are. The story you've been telling yourself about yourself. The role you've been playing in the social drama. The mask you've been wearing. The character you've been acting out. This identity was given to you. Your parents gave you part of it. Your culture gave you part of it. Your education, your friends, your experiences, they all contributed. And over time, you assembled all these pieces into a coherent story. I am this kind of person. I have this kind of background. These are my strengths and these are my weaknesses. This is what I believe. This is what I value. This is my place in the world. And this story, this identity, it feels absolutely real. It feels like the most solid, most undeniable thing about you. You've been identified with it for so long that you can't imagine being anything else. It's like wearing the same clothes every day for years until you forget you're wearing clothes at all. You think the clothes are your skin. But here's what happens when you're called to the hero's journey, when you're called to wake up, when life is demanding that you grow beyond your current limitations. That old identity becomes a prison. What once felt like a comfortable home now feels like a cage. The story that once gave you security now feels like a lie. The role that once fit you now feels like a costume that's too small. And this creates tremendous conflict. Part of you knows you need to grow, to change, to become something more. But another part of you is terrified of letting go of the old identity. Because if you're not this person you've always been, then who are you? If you let go of this story, what's left? If you take off the mask, what face will you find underneath? This is the threshold of the hero's journey. This is the moment when the call to adventure meets the fear of the unknown. And most people, when they reach this threshold, they refuse the call. They retreat back into the old identity. They say, "No, I know who I am. I'm not changing. This is just who I am and that's that." But the hero, the one who's willing to wake up, they do something different. They accept the call. They step across the threshold. And in doing so, they allow the old identity to die. Now, this death of the old identity, it's not usually a pleasant experience. In mythology, we see it represented in various ways. The hero is swallowed by a whale. They descend into the underworld. They're crucified. They're torn apart. These are symbolic representations of what happens psychologically when the old identity dissolves. It feels like death because it is death. Not physical death, but the death of everything you thought you were. And it's terrifying. It's disorienting. It's like the ground beneath your feet suddenly disappearing. All your reference points, all your certainties, all your ideas about yourself and your life, they're all called into question. They're all stripped away. I think of the story of Inanna descending into the underworld. At each of the 7 gates, she must remove one of her royal garments. Her crown, her jewels, her robes. Everything that marked her identity as queen, as goddess, as someone of status and power. Until finally she arrives at the throne of her dark sister Ereshkigal, completely naked, completely stripped of all that defined her. This is what happens in the death of the old identity. Everything that you've used to define yourself is taken away. Your achievements don't matter anymore. Your social status doesn't protect you. Your beliefs don't comfort you. Your story doesn't hold together. You're stripped bare. You're reduced to nothing. And in mythology, what happens next is crucial. Inanna is killed. She's turned into a corpse and hung on a hook. She must stay in that death state for 3 days and 3 nights. She must fully experience the death before the resurrection can occur. This is the part people want to skip. They want the transformation without the death. They want the butterfly without the dissolution of the caterpillar. But it doesn't work that way. The old identity must actually die. Not just be weakened or modified or adjusted. It must die. And when it does, when you've really allowed it to die, when you've gone through that dark night of the soul and experienced the complete dissolution of who you thought you were, something miraculous happens. A new identity begins to emerge. Not another false identity, not another mask, but your true self. The authentic you that was always there underneath all the layers of conditioning and pretense. This new identity is not given to you by others. It's not constructed from social expectations. It emerges from within. It's discovered, not invented. And it's vast beyond anything the old identity could have imagined. The old identity said, I am this limited person with this particular story. The new identity says, I am the hero of my own myth. I am the one who's making the journey. I am connected to something far greater than my individual story. This is why the death must happen. Because you cannot discover who you really are while you're still convinced you're someone else. You cannot find your true face while you're still wearing the mask. The old identity must die so that your authentic self can be born. The second reason, the old world must end. The second reason the awakened ones die before they live is that the old world must end. And by the old world, I mean the entire reality structure you've been living in. The way you've been perceiving reality. The way you've been interpreting experience. The meaning you've been making of life. You see, we don't live in reality directly. We live in our interpretation of reality. We live in the world according to our beliefs, our assumptions, our conditioning. And most of that worldview was given to us by our culture. We inherited it. We absorbed it unconsciously from the time we were children. Your culture told you what's real and what's not real. What's important and what's not important. What's possible and what's impossible. What's good and what's bad. And you believed it. You took it in without question because everyone around you seemed to agree. This is just the way things are. This is reality. But it's not reality. It's a reality. It's one particular way of constructing meaning out of the infinite mystery of existence. And it's a very limited way. It's like living your entire life in one room of a vast mansion and thinking that room is the entire house. When you're called to the hero's journey, when you're called to wake up, one of the things that must happen is that your old worldview must collapse. The walls of that room must come down. The reality structure you've been living in must be revealed as the construction it always was. This is deeply unsettling. Because your worldview is what makes reality feel stable, predictable, manageable. It's your map of reality. And when the map starts falling apart, when you realize it was never accurate to begin with, you feel lost. You feel like you're going crazy. You feel like reality itself is dissolving. In the great myths, this is often represented by the world ending. A flood that destroys everything. A fire that burns everything down. The end of an age. These are not just stories about external events. They're stories about internal transformation. They're describing what it feels like when your entire reality structure collapses. I think of the Norse myth of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. The old gods must die. The old world must be destroyed. The cosmic tree must burn. Only then can a new world be born, a new age begin. Or consider the Christian concept of the apocalypse. The word apocalypse doesn't actually mean destruction. It means revelation, unveiling. It's when the veil is lifted and you see reality as it actually is, not as you've been conditioned to see it. But for that revelation to occur, your old way of seeing must end. Your old world must have its apocalypse. This is what happens in genuine spiritual awakening. You have your own personal apocalypse. Your old worldview, your old reality structure, it has to die. And this death is often triggered by a crisis. A loss, a failure, a shock, something that doesn't fit into your existing worldview, that can't be explained by your existing beliefs. Maybe you lose someone you love, and suddenly all your beliefs about how life should work are shattered. Maybe you achieve everything you thought would make you happy, and you're still miserable, and suddenly your whole idea of what happiness is must be reconsidered. Maybe you have an experience, mystical or otherwise, that simply cannot be fit into your existing understanding of reality. Whatever the trigger, the result is the same. The old world ends. The old way of seeing, the old way of understanding, the old way of making meaning, it all falls apart. And you're left in what feels like chaos, like meaninglessness, like the void. This is the descent into the underworld. This is the belly of the whale. This is the dark night of the soul. You're between worlds. The old world has ended, but the new world hasn't yet been born. You're in the liminal space, the threshold, the place of dissolution and transformation. And here's what's crucial to understand. This is not a mistake. This is not a sign that something has gone wrong. This is exactly what's supposed to happen. The old world must end. Your old reality structure must dissolve. Because it was too small. It was too limited. It was a prison, even if it was a comfortable prison. The new world that will eventually emerge, the new way of seeing reality that will be born from this death, it will be vast beyond anything you can currently imagine. It will be more true, more alive, more real than anything you've experienced in the old world. But you can't get there by patching up the old worldview. You can't get there by trying to make the old beliefs work a little better. The old world must actually end. The old reality structure must actually die. Only then can you see with new eyes. Only then can you live in a new world. This is why every genuine spiritual tradition speaks of being born again, of seeing with the eyes of a child, of becoming new. Because that's what happens. When your old world dies and you emerge from that death, you're born into a new world. Not a different physical world, but a world seen with completely new eyes, understood in a completely new way, experienced with a completely new consciousness. And in that new world, everything is different. Not because things have changed, but because you have changed. Because your way of seeing has changed. Because the lens through which you perceive reality has been wiped clean of all the old conditioning, all the old assumptions, all the old limitations. This is the gift of the death of the old world. It's not comfortable. It's not easy. But it's necessary. Because you cannot wake up to a larger reality while you're still imprisoned in a smaller one. The old world must end so that the new world can begin. The third reason, the separate self must dissolve. And now we come to the third and deepest reason why the awakened ones die before they live. It's because the sense of being a separate self must dissolve. This is the ultimate death. This is the death that underlies all the other deaths. And it's the most terrifying and the most liberating death of all. Let me explain what I mean by the separate self. From the time you were born, you've been developing a sense of being a separate individual. You learn that you are you and not you. You are in here and the world is out there. You are this body, this mind, this personality, completely separate from everything else. This sense of separation is so fundamental, so deeply ingrained, that you probably never question it. Of course you're separate. Of course you're an individual. How could it be otherwise? But here's what the great myths and the great mystics and the great awakened beings have all discovered. This sense of separation is an illusion. It's the most convincing illusion in the world, but an illusion nonetheless. And as long as you're completely identified with this separate self, as long as you believe without question that you are this isolated individual, you cannot truly live. You can only survive, you can only defend, you can only seek and fear and grasp. True life, the life that the spiritually awake have discovered, only begins when this sense of separation dies. When the boundary between self and other is seen through. When you recognize that what you really are is not separate from the whole, but is the whole expressing itself as this particular form, this particular perspective. In mythology, this death of the separate self is represented in the most powerful symbols. It's the crucifixion of Christ. It's the dissolution of Buddha under the Bodhi tree. It's the dismemberment of Osiris. It's Dionysus being torn apart. These are not just stories about suffering. They're stories about the necessary destruction of the illusion of separation. Think about the crucifixion for a moment, not as a historical event, but as a symbol of psychological and spiritual transformation. What's being crucified? The separate self, the ego, the one who says I and mine and me, the one who feels isolated and threatened and defensive. And what happens after the crucifixion? The separate self dies. And then what? Resurrection. But notice, what resurrects is not the same thing that died. The separate self doesn't come back. What resurrects is Christ consciousness, universal consciousness, the recognition that what you really are is not the separate individual but the divine itself. This pattern appears again and again because it's the pattern of awakening. The separate self must die. Not be improved. Not be made more spiritual. Not be polished up and perfected. It must die. It must be seen through. It must be recognized as the illusion it always was. Now, why must this happen? Why can't you just be a more conscious separate self? Why can't you keep the sense of separation and just add some spiritual wisdom to it? Because the sense of separation is the root of all suffering. It's the source of fear, of anxiety, of loneliness, of the endless seeking that never finds satisfaction. As long as you believe you're a separate self, you're always vulnerable. You're always incomplete. You're always trying to get something, to avoid something, to become something. The separate self lives in constant conflict with reality. It's always saying, this shouldn't be happening. That should be different. I need this. I can't stand that. It's at war with what is because it's trying to defend and promote itself against a world that it perceives as other, as potentially threatening, as not self. But when the separate self dies, when that sense of boundary dissolves, everything changes. You discover what all the great myths have been pointing to. You are not separate from the whole. You are the whole. You are not a wave struggling against the ocean. You are the ocean expressing itself as this particular wave. This is what the hero discovers in the innermost cave, in the deepest part of the journey. This is the ultimate boon, the greatest treasure. Not some external reward, not some magical object, but the realization of your true nature. The realization that you and the universe are not two. And with this realization comes a life that's qualitatively different from anything you've experienced before. It's a life without fundamental fear. Because what is there to fear when you're not separate from the whole? What can threaten you when you're not a separate, vulnerable fragment? It's a life without fundamental lack. Because what is there to lack when you're the whole? What could be missing when you're everything? It's a life of spontaneous action. Because when the separate self dies, with its endless calculations and defenses and strategies, what remains is the natural flow of life itself moving through you. You become like water flowing downhill, like a tree growing toward the sun. You act not from ego-driven motivation but from the natural intelligence of the whole. This is what it means to truly live. Not the cramped, defensive, seeking life of the separate self, but the expansive, fearless, generous life of one who knows their unity with all that is. But you cannot live this life while the separate self is still running the show. The separate self must die. And this death is not a one-time event. It's a moment-by-moment letting go. It's a constant dying to the tendency to contract back into separation, to reassert the boundary, to defend the little self. The spiritually awake have learned to die continuously. Every moment is an opportunity to die to the separate self, to let go of the contraction, to relax back into the wholeness that you are. And every time you do this, every time you allow the separate self to die, you discover that what you really are has never been threatened, has never been separate, has never been anything but the whole. This is the deepest reason why you must die before you can live. Because the life you're seeking, the life of true freedom and joy and love, is not available to the separate self. It's only available when the separate self dies and reveals what was always here underneath. Your true nature, your original face, your participation in the great mystery of being itself. The pattern of death and rebirth. So there you have it. 3 reasons why the spiritually awake die before they live. The old identity must die so the true self can emerge. The old world must end so a new way of seeing can be born. And the separate self must dissolve so you can recognize your unity with the whole. These are not 3 separate deaths. They're 3 aspects of one transformation. They happen together. They support each other. And they constitute the essential pattern of awakening, the hero's journey, the path of transformation. And here's what I want you to understand. This death, this dying before you live, it's not optional. It's not something for a special few. It's the path that every human being must walk if they want to truly wake up, if they want to truly live. You can resist it. You can refuse the call. You can cling to the old identity, the old world, the separate self. Many people do. Most people do. They go through their entire lives never allowing these deaths to occur. And as a result, they never truly live. They exist. They survive. They get by. But they don't truly live. Or you can accept the call. You can have the courage to cross the threshold. You can allow these deaths to happen. You can go through the darkness trusting that there's light on the other side. You can let go of everything you think you are and discover what you really are. This is the hero's path. This is the path of awakening. And yes, it requires you to die. But what dies was never real to begin with. It was always just a story, just a construct, just an illusion. What's real, what you really are, that cannot die. That's eternal. That's indestructible. That's what remains when everything else has fallen away. And when you discover that, when you've gone through the death and come out the other side, you find that you've been given a gift. The gift is life itself. Not the small, fearful, defensive life of the separate self, but the vast, joyous, generous life of one who knows who they really are. This is why the myths tell us we must die before we live. Because it's true. It's the deepest truth of the spiritual path. You must let go of the false to find the true. You must lose your life to save it. You must die to be born again. The spiritually awake have made this journey. They've gone through this death. And what they found on the other side was not annihilation but the fullness of life itself. They found their true nature. They found their place in the great mythological story of the universe. They found that they were never separate, never alone, never anything but the whole expressing itself in this particular form. This is the promise of the hero's journey. This is what awaits you if you have the courage to answer the call. Not an easy path but a true one. Not a comfortable path but a transformative one. Not a path that avoids death, but a path that goes through death to find the life that lies beyond. So when the call comes, when life is asking you to let something die, when you're standing at the threshold of transformation, remember this. The spiritually awake die before they live. And they do so not because they're morbid or nihilistic or self-destructive. They do so because they understand that this death is not the end. It's the beginning. It's the gateway. It's the portal to the life you've always been seeking. Have the courage to die. And in that death, you'll discover that what you really are has never lived and never died. It simply is. And it's more beautiful, more vast, more real than anything you ever imagined in your old life, in your old world, in your old sense of self. This is the teaching of the myths. This is the pattern of the hero's journey. This is the path of awakening. Die before you live. And in that death, discover life itself.